If this is your first or second time here, hope you enjoyed the video. If this is your third time here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on when I post. And also, since it's that time of year again, if you are subscribed, well, have been subscribed, just go ahead and double check because YouTube likes to unsubscribe people from channels they think they're not interested in anymore. It's a whole strange thing. Anyway, with that out of the way, let's get into the idea. So I was sitting and thinking, the way I do, last time I was playing New Vegas, and it got me thinking on how do the vaults actually work? Yeah, sure, they're underground nuclear fallout shelters, as one might figure from the name, but like, how do they work? Right, you know they got massive nuclear reactors or whatever you want to call them, but why does the vault need something so significant, right? Yeah, sure, you could say that way they don't need to go to the surface for power or anything. I get that, but like, where's the rest of the infrastructure for the vault, right? Every vault we see in every game is, quite frankly, small. Now, this could be an entire situation like in the Elder Scrolls games where the imperial capital of Cyrodiil is supposed to be a massive city, but, you know, it's a very small town. Same with Skyrim, for instance. But the vaults in Fallout have always been shown as small. And it's even explained away in lore as them being just testing centers for Vault-Tec anyway. You wouldn't want a huge population that could possibly rise up against Vault-Tec and, you know, that sort of thing. So I can understand small populations in the vaults. That got me wondering, okay, well, the vaults aren't huge. While there are some areas and some vaults you can't access, even then they're mostly like living quarters, maybe a reactor level, things like that. Makes me wonder, how does a vault like Vault 101 keep going? Their experiment was to see how long a smaller group of people, genetic diversity as they refer to it as, can stay relevant and propagate for. So over 200 years, the vault pretty much remained sealed, comings and goings and whatnot, but makes you wonder how they have. Well, we know how they have water, the water chip, but food and medicine and weapons and ammo and armor and clothing and all the other necessities that you'd have. Looking around vaults, you'll always find like vendo-matics, the weird vending machine things that open up where you can get food and stuff from, along with drink vending machines and the like. But they got me thinking, specifically one of the vaults refers to the jumpsuit systems. The vault suits. It says that they are extruded. Vault-Tec suit extruders malfunctioned and the people in the vault had no clothing at that point. So that made me wonder, okay, well, what is a clothing extruder and why not just have pre-made suits? Well, you don't have pre-made suits because you can't possibly carry everyone's size, right? That's understandable. Okay, so it's like a machine that manufactures suits from raw materials, but in Fallout New Vegas, it's explained that the Vault-Tec vault jumpsuits are leather. And some other games show them more as a fabric, and that's strange. Okay, so it's a manufacturing system that makes vault suits from textiles. Okay, I can understand that. Does that mean they have a huge supply of textiles on hand, cloth or leather? And you probably wouldn't want to keep using the same stuff over and over again, and there must be a system to somehow break it back down, if that's the case, to be able to recycle it. And what I landed on for all of this, after floundering for a little bit, was a through line that took me from conception to full-on production runs of items. So let me just explain here. The United States government in Fallout universe created many think tanks throughout the country. The most notable one is the one that we interact with, known as the think tank. The think tank is this is annoying. The think tank is a bunch of robot think tanks, right? Like you have robo brains, that's the chassis and all that. You know what a robo brain looks like. A think tank is literally the name of the robot, and it's also the name of the group and an occupation. It's a whole thing, right? Anyway, the think tank at the Big Empty, Big Mountain. They've developed many things for the government over the years. Some of the most notable ones were pre-war, were the detonation collars used to inter Chinese American citizens during the Great War. Along with that, there are many other amazing things that the think tank has made. One of the items that the think tank made was made in tandem with the United States government, and the United States government, being the government and working so closely with West-Tec and Vault-Tec, most likely allowed the use of this item in the vaults. The most notable one being the water chip, right? It's one of the things we have, like, the first contact within the first Fallout game. We have to go find a water chip. It's talked about in Fallout 3 and Fallout 2 and all sorts of different things like that. Now, everyone always believes that the water chip is some type of filtration device, which, sure, it could be. It could be. Although, from things we hear later on, it doesn't really make sense that it would be a filtration device. So, let me just explain here. 3Dog explains how James is trying to get Project Purity running, and if he does get it running, then you'd no longer need to rely on some old fountain, water fountain, in an old subway tunnel that's connected to like an old ancient deep well system that's radioactive free, right? That explains to me that wells drilled deep enough were not contaminated with fallout, which makes sense. It would have most likely be stuck in the topsoil and all that happy good shit. But it means wells drilled deep enough would completely avoid that. And if a vault's being built into a mountain, like many of them were, then, you drill a deep well there, and it's most likely never going to be touched by radiation, so why do you need a water chip to scrub radiation? Okay, maybe it's other things that might need to be removed from it, but, basic filtration systems can do the same thing and are easily rebuilt when needed, right? Some of the oldest filtration systems on the planet were invented by the Romans and are technically still in use today in many filtration systems that you attach to your faucet, for instance. Then we have James himself pretty much saying that his experimentation with water chips in Vault 101 has led him to the conclusion on how to actually get Project Purity to work. And as such, he would need a GEC from a vault to do that. If he needed something that just scrubbed radiation from water, why couldn't he just use, a water chip for that if that's what water chips were being used for? He can collect those up probably easier than he could a GEC. After all, every vault needed a water chip. At least one, so why not just use a water chip as the main focal point of Project Purity? Now some could say that, it worked in a smaller scale, but it didn't. I don't think it did, right? I don't think it did. For the reason of, I believe a water chip literally just makes water. Input power, and then it somehow converts the power into water. Pretty much a type of matter manipulation, except the matter is energy, and then that energy is converted into matter somehow. That's where the whole chip portion of it comes in. But that would explain why Vault 13 had, 3.5 months, give or take, of water stored. If it was a filtration problem, then either the water that they already had wouldn't be useful because it would be held in like a cistern, or quite frankly, they could just drink somewhat contaminated groundwater, maybe dose it with some Radaway or something. A baseline like that would make sense. And again, if the wells are deep enough, they wouldn't need to worry about that at all. But to me, it seems like the vaults didn't have deep wells, that the vaults were all just contained units, as in the cistern that holds the water, that could hold the water for 3.5 months, let's say. You run power into the water chip produces the water that fills the cistern. Once it's full, you stop using and utilizing the water chip, you draw from your water stores until it hits like 25 to 30%, then you turn on the water chip again, produce your water, and you do that as a cycle so it's not running non-stop, bleeding power from your systems. It also explains why so many vaults need so many nuclear reactors and the like in them. There's no way vaults need 3, 4, 8 of the things, or an entire level dedicated to them, to power lights, air filtration, water pumps, waste management, that sort of thing. The amount of, quite frankly, nuclear reactors, or whatever you want to call them, in vaults could power a small city, it seems. And most vaults don't even have more than, quite frankly, in-game, you don't see a vault that has more than 100 people in it. But let's be generous. Let's say there's entire sections you never see. Let's say 2,000 people in a vault, right? That would make sense. So let's say the Big Empty helped develop the first water chip system. It would also give humanity the ability to go amongst the stars, to settle on the moon, to do whatever in space, which is what Vault-Tec wanted. So a water chip would be able to just create water from power. Makes sense in the long run, especially out in space and on ships and the like. So what about everything else? Well, they got me thinking, okay, well, if they can make water like this, why can't they make other things like this? And then I thought about it. My most hated DLC for any Fallout game, Dead Money, and I realized, oh shit, they literally can. Alright, so follow me on this one. Big Mountain created the vending machines of the Sierra Madre. Now, I'm not going to go too in-depth on them right here, right yet, but let's just say they're what came after. Let's say the first generation is the water chip. Let's say the Big Mountain, the government, and Vault-Tec all decided to pull resources together to create the prototype and first generation infrastructure systems of the vaults and United States military bunkers and complexes, right? Let's say they figure out how to, extrude clothing, input a set of measurements into it, hit go on it, in which case it literally converts energy into the material needed to create the clothing and then creates the clothing. In-house manufacturing. You never need to worry about running out of clothing at that point, as long as you have enough power. Okay, what about food? Well, every vault that we come across seems to have pre-war food in it. Sugar bombs and Instamash and you name it. They seem to have it. Now, I highly doubt Vault-Tec would stock up a bunch of expired goods for people to eat for the next 200 years, but it would make more sense if they could just make a box of Instamash. Which, those of you that do not know, Instamash is literally just potato flakes. It's, well, back in the day, they were originally just dehydrated potatoes, mashed potatoes. Nowadays, you can get fancy ones that are like freeze-dried mashed potatoes. Any which way, that's what Instamash is, so maybe they figured out how to just make food like that. Oh wait, they did. It's in the vending machines in the Sierra Madre. But we'll get there. We'll get there. Now let's say they only make a set amount of things, right? Each system is its own thing that only does one thing. That way when the system goes down, it can be repaired or replaced with a secondary or tertiary system. You know, one to wear, one for spare, and one to wear when the spare wears out type situation, right? So you have a system for water. The water chip, system for clothing, the jumpsuit extruders, system for food. And you may say, well, vaults grow their own food. No, not really. I think the most in-depth agricultural setup we've seen in a vault actually comes from the Fallout TV show, which shows like a small field that's got like corn and stuff in it. Nowhere near enough food can be grown there to actually sustain anyone in the vault. By the by, most vault jobs just seem like busy work anyway to keep people occupied. That comes for later though. And then a system for medicine. They always seem to have stimpaks and med-X and other odds and ends medical-wise. And again, I doubt the vault would have stocked a bunch of these to expire because stimpaks can expire. So it makes sense to have a system that can literally make them. And again, you can. Now, let's say the first generation ones of these just run off of straight energy. The more energy you input into them, the faster the system makes them. There you go. You don't need to use them all the time. You just need to use it to make batch work. Words are hard sometimes. You know, create clothing for people when they become a certain age. Create food seasonally, create water as needed, create stimpaks and chems as needed, create weapons and ammunition as needed, right? That would make the most sense for vaults being so self-contained. It would also explain why they use so much power for being so small. It would also explain why they don't seem to have deep well systems drilled or very large agricultural areas to sustain their people, really. Now let's say the government gets all these sweet systems, they let Vault-Tec use them too. Vault-Tec in turn makes bunkers and stuff for the government since they know what they're doing. You get places like Raven Rock that are just really stocked up to the nines with pre-war goods. Makes sense. At the end of the day, for that situation. Then Vault-Tec, of course, uses it in its vaults. That way they can streamline the whole process and not need to worry about micromanaging so many things. By the by, it's easier to keep an eye on someone when they're doing a job that doesn't really matter than it does, you know, actually have them produce their own food. Sure, you can have some people work in a field, you know, feeling like they're contributing and whatnot, but the reality of it is, sure, they'll eat that harvest at like a special event or something, but the food they're eating all year round is going to come from the machines that make them, right? But after seeing the success of using these systems in the vaults, the Big Empty, the scientists there that developed it, most likely thought, hey, let's make this smaller, right? As all technology happens, and as goes the way with all tech. I'll look at the recharger rifle and pistol. Same thing. So what most likely happened is they created a smaller, more streamlined, consumer-friendly version of these machines. The vending machines that you find at the Sierra Madre. Sinclair saw these at a World's Fair and pretty much threw his entire capital behind it. All of his money, all of his connections into developing these things fully. And as such, he wanted them in the Sierra Madre so bad that he refused to have any other vending machines in his casino and resort beyond these vending machines. Unique thing about these Sierra Madre vending machines is they don't seem to be hooked up to any infrastructure like the machines in the vaults would need, right? The machines in the vaults need vast amount of power to be able to create these items that the vault needs to continue functioning. These vending machines, though, as you can see by Father Elijah literally just taking one back to the Mojave, they don't really need to be hooked up to anything to work correctly, so all you need to do is have the correct chips to put in them, the Sierra Madre chips. Now, some people try to explain away the way the vending machines work as each chip is an individual set of materials needed to create an item. I don't think that's true, right? See, that would be true if they left more ambiguity to what the chips were made out of, but you can literally take a perk in-game that lets you counterfeit these chips, and all it takes to counterfeit these chips is scrap metal and a fission battery, which that proves to me it's not some specialized alloy or anything. It's literally just a metal housing with pretty much a specialized battery in the core of it, which to me says these chips, these tokens, they are a ration. Think of them like a ration stamp from World War II. One chip gets you X amount of power. You put 150 chips into it and you can get a specialized item out, and such as 25 chips for a stimpak, or 5 chips for some mac and cheese, or 75 chips for a demolition charge, of all goddamn things, right? It makes sense that if each of these chips is literally just one ration unit of power, the more you put in, the more power it has to draw from, the more complex the engram, pattern, whatever you want to call it, it can produce. Some of these patterns are locked behind specialized authorizations, such as weapons and stimpaks and chems, and I do believe even alcohol and the like. Now, mind you, they do have internal power systems. One of the big things that you can figure is you can sell to these vending machines. You can't really sell anything you want. I'm fairly sure you can sell certain types of clothing to them, and you can sell cigarettes to them. Now, you can't make a metal chip out of cigarettes, right? But it seems like it can break down matter into energy to then create more matter with, right? But it does have a diminishing return, right? You can't send in a whole carton of cigarettes and then buy a carton of cigarettes from it, right? It's diminishing returns each time, which makes sense. But it does have the ability to manufacture chips, just like people have the ability to manufacture chips to use with them. Elijah figured that this would be the best way to save the wasteland. If it wasn't so fucking crazy, he might have been right on that. Instead of trying to make detonation collars and then somehow harness the toxic cloud over the Sierra Madre to take over the wasteland, or whatever villain shit he was trying to do, he could have sat down with this machine, since he was a tech genius, and figured out how to instill his own parameters into it to produce desired results. Right away, I think that's for sale in them if you find the correct engram. Not entirely sure. It's been a long time since I played Dead Money. Or maybe prefabrication units for houses, right? Which brings us to like the houses in Sanctuary Hills and Fallout 4. Those houses are all prefab houses, kit houses. You would buy them, they were like metal frames you'd stick up, then they had like enameled panels that you would either screw or rivet in place, then you place insulation, and then you put the interior walls on. Entire houses made out of metal, mind you. Enameled metal at that. Interesting, you can look at them up, you can look them up. Words, goddamn. Then again, it's like 2 in the morning here. So, the houses, you could produce houses with it, right? You could produce, apparently, other energy storage devices and means. If you input enough energy into these things, you could probably produce generators. Probably not, indefinite generators, but, actual generators to use, solar, wind, water, whatever. And you can also use them to produce medicines and weapons and tools and anything else you could program into it, it can make, right? So again, if he wasn't so batshit crazy, he would have been correct about this. Then again, the Brotherhood probably would have hated the idea of utilizing technology like this when they could have just buried it deep and never worried about it. Doesn't matter, because the tech was already out there. Now you may be thinking, okay, well, if you pump enough power into one of these things, you can make anything. And you could, right? The ones in the vaults are specialized for their own, specializations. The food one makes food, the water one makes water, the clothing one makes clothing, right? The vending machine was more a jack of all trades, master of none. It could make weapons and food and armor and all that. It just couldn't do it in the volume that was needed, right? Not to mention the huge amount of power it would need to use. You would need to use to run these things for any significant gain. Now, the reason that they weren't really pushed out to the mainstream was, there's like 2 or 3 reasons here. First one, the United States of America at this point in time had just finished fighting the resource wars with China for pretty much anything that could produce power, be it oil or uranium or anything that could really produce power, right? That's the first one. No need to give everyone a vending machine that can make literally anything they needed if it's going to make power usage as a whole like 1,000 times worse. Okay, so no need to do that. Makes sense. Okay, well, reason 2 is, the Great War happened. The Sierra Madre was supposed to be a proving ground for this technology so that it could be more widely adopted by, like, governments and schools and whatnot. But the Great War happened, so there's not really anything that could be done about that. Sad. But that doesn't mean that is the terminus of the line of technology, right? This technology branched off due to Vault-Tec, right? The vending machines were Big Empty's finalization of the technology, right? They started with the systems for the Vault, and then they created the vending machines. That's their line. Vault-Tec also did its own experimentation with it, as Vault-Tec always does, and they came up with a different system entirely. And they referred to it as the Construction and Assembly Mobile Platform, the camp. Yes, I know it's from Fallout 76 and whatnot, but it's a Fallout game, so just follow me on this one here. The camp systems in Fallout 76 are pretty much mobile player bases with workshops, blah blah, all that happy good shit. The reality of it is, when a camp opens up, there's a drill press, there's a lathe, there's a table saw, there's a vise. It looks like a mini factory workshop that you could use. But one of the strange things is, when you first pick the camp up, it's sitting in front of some literature that explains how it works. It says, find flat ground, drop your camp, use resources to build, and then survive in style. The little animation infomercial that you can also watch on the camp system, yes, it could very well be stylized, but then again, who knows with Fallout. It shows the camp system literally taking the materials that you gather and then creating the items, a bed, a campfire, stuff like that. To me, this seems like the final step in evolution for the Vault systems, right? The Vault systems take power, produce item. This system, self-contained power unit, that takes materials and then produces the item. A lot less heartache and hassle, a lot less energy is needed to restructure something that's already of that, right? You want to build a wooden wall? Well, give it wood and you can make a wooden wall. You want to make a concrete wall? Give it concrete and you can make a concrete wall, right? You want to make a bed? Give it fabric and whatnot and you can make a bed that way. So instead of needing huge amounts of power to make a house, for instance, you just give it the materials it needs and it can build you a house, right? This seems like the final step in evolution. Not to mention, as far as we know, only one Vault had these systems in place before the end of the world. That's Vault 76. It was to be used for Reclamation Day for the sole purpose of rebuilding after the end of the world. They figured people would take these things out into the world and then rebuild manufacturing centers, rebuild infrastructure, rebuild city services, generators, power plants, that sort of thing. It's just they never realized that, quite frankly, if you were born in a vault, only lived in a vault, were then thrown out of a vault with a pretty much magic system to build anything you wanted, why would you try to rebuild a world that you never lived in? So the Vault Dwellers just kind of fucked off with these units. Mind you, these units seem to have had a very small shelf life, so to speak, because we don't hear about them in any of the other Fallout games. Now, I understand that's because Fallout 76 is the newest Fallout entry, and they added something new into it, therefore it's not talked about in the other games. I understand that. But then again, it only being given to one specific vault that was literally made to rebuild the area, it could be understandable that the technology was very niche and was only ever really used in this one situation. So it's a different branch of the same technology that the Sierra Madre vending machines would be, right? Instead of using the preset power rations for that, it uses its own internal fusion cell, fusion core, whatever you want to call it, to power its functions to be able to restructure raw materials that you bring to it, which would make the most sense. Hell, maybe some other vaults did have this type of technology and it just wasn't called the camp, right? Maybe Vault City had technology like that, right? Vault City was made when the people of Vault 8 went out into the wasteland. Looking at the architecture of Vault City, they all seem to be, some would say, Southwestern inspired, like almost Adobe style houses. Some would say brutalistic architecture, rounded concrete, that sort of thing. To me, it seems like almost prefabricated sections that have just been stuck together to make these buildings. So maybe Vault City was made using a system like the camp system. Who knows, right? They can try to retcon it in any way they want at this point. Franchise belongs to them at the end of the day. So just to recap here, because I try to do that at the end of each one of these, just to try to keep my mind straight and my thought process straight. Big Empty created a unique type of infrastructure for the vaults. These systems turned pure energy into matter. Most likely started with the water chip and then moved on to food construction and then clothing and medicines and weapons and the other items like that. Each system was most likely its own contained machine. That way, when one system goes down, the entire operation doesn't fall because of it. Now, Big Empty continued to innovate on this technology and created the vending machines of the Sierra Madre. The vending machines of the Sierra Madre, instead of being hooked up to massive generator systems to harness that energy, used energy rations and in the form of casino chips. The reality of it is some people think that these chips also have the raw material in them for creating items. I don't think that's the case because you can manufacture these chips yourself using scrap metal and a fission battery. To me, it shows that they are just mini batteries that you can plug into it. When you plug these mini batteries into it, you can then create an item for that amount of power usage. 25 chips gets you a stim pack. 5 chips gets you some mac and cheese, right? Vault-Tec, having been given this technology, developed their own line of it. They figured instead of using massive amounts of power, which wouldn't be around after the end of the world, instead, what if we make it so that it has an inbuilt power system that only needs to be utilized to restructure matter that already exists? Probably takes a lot less energy to restructure matter that already exists into a different form of the same matter than it does to create matter from energy anyway. So they created the camp systems. The camps allow for the utilization of raw materials to make items. Doesn't mean that it is absolutely positively one of these Vault extruder machines used in a smaller scale. No, not at all. But to me, it seems like it is the next step in evolution of that. You give it materials, it gives you a bed or a house or a stove to cook at, items like that. So to me, this explains why the vaults can be so dense, not have access to actual utilities such as deep wells and the like. The matter deconstruction that the vending machines also utilize could explain away waste removal from the vaults, and then just the overall use and utilization of restructuring matter into a different form. Like a wooden log is now a wooden wall, right? Anyway, it explains it in my head that is how the vaults operate, just matter construction from energy. Anyway, thanks for watching if you still are. Thanks for listening to this ramble of mine. And I understand it's a video game, you don't need to try to explain everything away. It could very well be like the Elder Scrolls where we're seeing a more bite-sized version of the vaults. Who knows, maybe the vaults are the size of entire towns with their infrastructure and manufacturing and all of that. Although even since the first Fallout game, the vaults have always been very small, right? So I feel like it's less a limitation and more a byproduct of Vault-Tec wanting a very controllable population. If you have 10,000 people running around inside a vault, it's hard to keep tabs on all of them. But if you have 1,000 people running around inside a vault, give them busy work to do, you can keep tabs on them, right? So I'd like to thank my member, Eric Hewitt. Thanks again, much appreciated. If you didn't know, I have memberships and whatnot. Some people have also donated to me through like super thanks and whatnot. Much appreciated. I enjoy doing these videos, just spitballing ideas and whatnot. They're fun. Just sit down and think about an aspect of the Fallout games. Wonder how it operates like that. By the by, I also have a very inexpensive membership tier. It's at $2, which is I think the lowest you could donate. Gets you access to all the members only videos and stuff I post. There's an entire Courier 6 run from beginning to end out there, along with monthly videos, monthly challenge runs and lore videos, along with sometimes some raw unedited audio from videos that I'm either working on or made and then wasn't really happy with the idea of, so instead of letting that go to waste, I just put it up there for members. Again, it's raw audio with all the gaps in my speech as I sit and think about what I'm saying. So anyway, I'm going to end this for tonight, especially since this is running on like 40 minutes. You guys are getting a cut down version of it with all my pauses and lapses in judgment cut out of it. So yeah, I'm going to get some sleep. Thanks for watching. Again, if you are subscribed, just go ahead and make sure you are, because YouTube does like to unsubscribe people from the channel this time of year. So, best to check. All right, I'm going to bed.